I am Liam, and I am 30 years old. 3 weeks ago, I woke up to a nightmare I never could have anticipated. Looking out my front window to see my parents literally unloading a moving truck onto my driveway, carrying my older brother's furniture straight toward my front door. I was right in the middle of a critical deployment meeting for the software firm where I work as a senior systems architect. My screen was full of 12 different faces from across 4 time zones. I was leading the call, explaining the final integration steps for a system that processes millions of transactions daily. The stakes were incredibly high. Then, my doorbell camera started pinging my phone like a fire alarm. I muted my microphone, looked at the live feed, and my blood ran completely cold. In broad daylight, under a clear blue Ohio sky, my father was directing 2 men carrying a solid oak dresser. My mother stood on my porch, waving cheerfully at the lens. I ran downstairs, threw the door open, and demanded to know what on earth they thought they were doing. My mother didn't even blink. She just smiled this sickeningly sweet smile and said, "We're here to help with the transition. You work from home, right? Where you stay doesn't matter. Just grab your laptop. Honey, the basement is all ready for you." My father chimed in, telling the movers to just push past me, pointing toward my freshly painted living room. In that moment, staring at the people who were supposed to love and protect me, I felt a rage so pure it almost blinded me. My own parents were hijacking my property. So I planted my feet, looked them dead in the eye and replied, "Get off my property right now. It also doesn't matter to me that you all stay in prison tonight, because I will call the cops in exactly 10 seconds. But there was a crucial detail my parents didn't know yet. They thought they were dealing with the same quiet, compliant kid they had steamrolled for 3 decades. They had no idea about the real estate attorney I already had on speed dial, or the heavy, ironclad lawsuit I was preparing that would leave them with absolutely nothing. And right now, as I speak to you, they are the ones begging for a second chance. Before I tell you exactly how I dismantled their insane scheme piece by piece, please do me a favor. Hit that like button if you believe that blood doesn't give anyone the right to steal from you, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you are tuning in from. Now, let's rewind to where this absolute madness truly began. To understand the sheer audacity of that moving truck pulling into my driveway, you have to understand the dinner we had 3 weeks prior. I live in suburban Ohio, in a beautiful, modest 3-bedroom colonial that I bought entirely on my own 2 years ago. This house is my sanctuary. I spent every spare weekend renovating it. I laid down the hardwood floors myself. I installed a custom kitchen with a farmhouse sink and granite countertops. I transformed the largest spare bedroom into a state-of-the-art home office with acoustic paneling, multiple monitors, and a dedicated server rack. I earn a high salary in the tech industry, and I worked brutally hard to get here. I don't commute to a cubicle farm. I log in from my sanctuary, managing complex digital infrastructure. My home is a reflection of my independence. My older brother, Ethan, is 34. He lives about 20 minutes away with his wife, Chloe, and their 3 kids, an 8-year-old boy, a 6-year-old girl, and a 3-year-old boy. They live in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment that constantly smells like stale diapers and fried food. Ethan has always struggled, but his struggles are entirely of his own making. He jumps from job to job, currently working as a retail shift manager. I have absolutely nothing but respect for honest work, but Ethan's financial mess is largely due to his own terrible decisions, his refusal to save money, and Chloe's absolute obsession with keeping up appearances on credit cards. We were sitting around my parents' dining room table for a Sunday roast. It was a tradition I usually tried to avoid, but my mother had laid on the guilt thick that week. The air in the dining room was heavy, thick with the smell of overcooked beef gravy and an unspoken, lingering tension. I could feel their eyes on me the moment I sat down. Chloe kept making these passive-aggressive comments about how nice it must be to have a quiet house while her kids were screaming in the background. Ethan just sat there, aggressively sawing at his meat, avoiding eye contact. My mother, Eleanor, wiped her mouth with a cloth napkin and started asking these very pointed, specific questions about my daily routine. "So, Liam," she said, passing a bowl of mashed potatoes that I didn't ask for. You really just sit at that computer all day long? You don't actually go anywhere? You don't leave the house? I sighed internally. I had explained my career 100 times. Mom, yes, I work from home, but I am actually working. I have intense strategy meetings, I write complex code, I manage a team of 12 engineers. It's a demanding schedule. Just because I'm not driving to an office building doesn't mean I'm playing video games. My dad, Robert, scoffed loudly, scraping his fork against his porcelain plate. It was a sound that always made my teeth grind. But it's not like real work, is it? You don't have to put on boots. You don't have to show up to a real facility. You work in your pajamas. It's a pretend job that just happens to pay you. I should have seen the trap closing right then and there, but I was completely blindsided by the sheer entitlement of what came next. My mother set her napkin down, folded her hands together on the table, and looked at me with an expression of manufactured pity. Well, Liam, your father and I have been thinking. We've been talking about the family's future. Since you don't really need all that space in your house, realistically, you just need a desk and an internet connection. Wouldn't it make more sense for Ethan and his family to live there? You could move into our basement. We're getting it finished next month. We picked out a lovely shade of gray for the walls. I actually laughed. A deep, genuine, booming laugh, because the joke was just so incredibly absurd. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to crack a smile, but nobody else was laughing. Ethan stared intensely at his plate, pushing some peas around. Chloe had this predatory glint in her eye, like she was already measuring my living room for her oversized, tacky sectional sofa. You're not joking, I said, the amusement instantly draining from my face. The room suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. My dad leaned forward and launched into a literal presentation. I am not exaggerating. He had talking points prepared in his head. He talked about family resource optimization. He argued that a family with 3 growing children has actual physical space needs, while a single guy with a laptop doesn't deserve a whole house. He listed out points on his fingers. 1. I work from home, so I don't need a real house. 2. Children need a backyard to play in. 3. A basement is perfect for a bachelor. 4. It's my duty as a brother. He actually said, out loud, looking me dead in the eye, that they would generously allow me to use the main floor bathroom during work hours if I moved into their basement, provided I didn't take too long and interrupt my mother's soap operas. You want me? I said slowly, making sure I enunciated every single syllable so there was no misunderstanding. To give up the house I bought with my own money, to live in your damp, unfinished basement, because my job is remote? My mother frowned, acting as if I was the one being incredibly unreasonable and difficult. It's not like you're using it properly, Liam. You have 2 empty rooms. You just use them for your office and your music recording hobbies. That's incredibly wasteful when your own blood family needs real housing. Ethan's kids are sleeping in a closet practically. I tried to inject logic into a room utterly devoid of it. I kept my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. I reminded them that I pay the mortgage. I pay the astronomical property taxes. I pay the homeowner's insurance. I pay the utilities. It is my name and only my name on the deed. I saved for a 20% down payment while eating ramen noodles for 3 years. My father just shook his head in absolute disgust, waving his hand as if my financial responsibility was completely irrelevant. But you earned that money sitting in a chair at home, Liam. It's not the same as Ethan, who has to commute to a real job and stand on his feet all day. Family helps family. You have a surplus and they have a deficit. We are fixing it. I stood up from the table. I didn't say another word. I grabbed my coat, walked out the front door, and got into my car. I drove home gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I honestly, foolishly thought they would wake up the next morning, realize how insane they sounded, and drop it. I thought it was just a bizarre, drunken Thanksgiving-level family argument that would fade away. I was so incredibly wrong. The nightmare hadn't even truly started. The silence I expected the next day never came. Instead, My phone started vibrating at 7 a.m. and didn't stop. I looked at the screen and saw a barrage of text messages from my mother. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't walking back the insane demands. She was leaning in. She was sending me links to Home Depot paint swatches. Liam, do you prefer agreeable gray or accessible beige for the basement walls? We want you to feel comfortable in your new zone. Your father is picking up the drywall today. Also, let me know when you can drop off your house keys. Chloe wants to bring a contractor by to look at taking down that wall between your living room and kitchen to make it more open concept for the kids. I stared at the screen, my morning coffee turning cold and bitter in my hand. It was a visceral punch to the gut. The sheer, unadulterated entitlement wasn't just annoying. It was a profound violation of my existence. It brought back a massive, suffocating flood of memories I had spent years in expensive therapy trying to bury. Growing up, Ethan was the undisputed golden child. He was the high school football star who blew out his knee senior year, and my parents treated it like a national tragedy that excused every subsequent failure in his life. If Ethan got a C on a math test, he was praised for trying his absolute best against a difficult teacher. If I got an A, my father would scrutinize the paper and ask why it wasn't an A+. When it came time for college, the devastating truth of their favoritism became financial reality. My grandparents had set up a college fund for both of us, a substantial amount meant to give us a head start. But when Ethan was 22, he decided he didn't want to work for anyone else. He wanted to open a custom car shop. My parents quietly drained the entire college fund, including my half, to pay for his lease, his tools, and a massive stupid neon sign that he bought instead of paying his vendors. The shop went bankrupt in 8 months. Ethan walked away with a shrug, and my parents completely forgave him. Meanwhile, I had to take out massive, crippling student loans. I worked agonizing night shifts at a gas station to pay for my textbooks. I remember smelling like gasoline and stale coffee, sitting under a flickering fluorescent light at 3 a.m., trying to teach myself complex algorithms while my friends were out at college parties. My achievements were always minimized. When I landed my first six-figure salary, my father didn't congratulate me. He just muttered about computer money. It was never real to them because it didn't fit their blue-collar, suffering equals worth narrative. My success highlighted Ethan's failure, so my success had to be invalidated. I looked at the text message from my mother again. I felt the familiar urge to explain, to justify my existence, to beg for their understanding. But the therapy kicked in. I took a deep breath, and I replied with one single, definitive sentence. Do not contact me about this again. You are not getting my keys, and I am not moving out of my own home. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Aunt Martha, my dad's older sister. Martha had always positioned herself as the family peacemaker, the one who baked cherry pies and smoothed over arguments at Thanksgiving dinners. I picked up, hoping for a voice of reason. Liam, honey, she said, her voice dripping with artificial, saccharine concern. Your mother is just in absolute tears over here. She's inconsolable. You're being so incredibly harsh. You know how much Ethan is struggling with those 3 kids in that tiny place. Why are you holding on to a house that's way too big for you? It's just bricks and wood. Liam, family is forever. Aunt Martha? I replied, keeping my voice terrifyingly calm, though my hands were shaking. If it's just bricks and wood, why don't you give Ethan your 4-bedroom house and you can move into my parents' basement? You live alone too. She gasped, highly offended, as if I had just slapped her across the face. That is entirely different, Liam. I am an elder. I earned my home. You are a young, single man who just plays on his laptop all day. You're being deeply selfish. I always thought you were the smart one, the generous one, but clearly you lack basic human empathy. I hung up on her. I didn't have the energy for the emotional manipulation. But what I didn't know at that exact moment was that Aunt Martha wasn't calling to play peacemaker. She wasn't calling to reason with me. She was calling to keep me distracted. Later that evening, my dad called. I let it go straight to voicemail, but he left a message that chilled me to the bone. His voice was cold, authoritative, and completely detached from reality. Liam, you are disrespecting this family. A man who works in his pajamas shouldn't be hoarding real estate while a real family suffers in an apartment. Your grandfather would be deeply ashamed of the greedy, corporate coward you've become. We are coming to an arrangement regarding the house, with or without your cooperation. You need to prepare yourself. The next day, I was putting away groceries in my kitchen when I noticed something missing from the wooden hook by the back door. It was an old spare house key on a generic brass ring. I had given it to Aunt Martha 2 years ago when I went on a business trip to Seattle so she could water my indoor plants. I had completely forgotten she still had it. The realization hit me like a freight train. She had kept the key. She hadn't just called to scold me. She had handed that key over to my parents. That was the turning point. The sadness, the lingering childhood desire for my parents' approval, the guilt. It all evaporated in a single instant. It was replaced by a cold, hard, razor-sharp survival instinct. I didn't cry. I didn't yell at the walls. I walked straight to my garage, grabbed my heavy-duty toolkit, and spent the next 3 hours changing every single deadbolt on my house. I didn't buy cheap locks. I bought the highest-grade security locks available. I upgraded my doorbell camera. I installed 4 new, high-definition security cameras around the perimeter of my property, ensuring every angle of my yard was covered. I set up motion sensors that linked directly to my phone. I was a systems architect. If there was one thing I knew how to do better than anyone else, it was build a firewall. And I was building a massive, impenetrable digital and physical firewall around my life. I thought the changed locks would send a clear enough message. I thought the physical barrier would force them to back down, to realize I was completely serious. But toxic families don't recognize boundaries. They only see them as challenges. That brings us right back to the moment the massive 20-foot U-Haul moving truck pulled into my driveway. When I stood on my porch, staring down my father and the 2 burly movers holding Ethan's disgusting, peeling full-leather sofa, I could see the absolute shock in my dad's eyes when the spare key he tried to use didn't turn in the lock. He jiggled it, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "You changed the locks," my dad growled, dropping the key. "On your own family. You locked your mother out. It's called private property, Dad, and you are trespassing on it." I looked past him at Ethan, who was standing near the back of the truck, looking deeply uncomfortable but doing absolutely nothing to stop the madness. "Are you seriously going along with this, Ethan? You're going to try and steal my house in broad daylight?" Ethan shoved his hands deep into his pockets, refusing to make eye contact. "It's not stealing, Liam. Mom and Dad said it was a family decision. The kids really need a backyard, man. You don't even use the yard. It's just sitting there." Chloe pushed her way to the front, holding her youngest child on her hip like a theatrical prop to garner sympathy from the movers. "Liam, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Think of your niece and nephews. Do you really want them sleeping in a closet while you hoard an entire house? Where is your heart? We already told the landlord we were moving." "My heart is fine," I snapped, my voice echoing down the quiet suburban street. "My mortgage is also fine. I am giving you all exactly 10 seconds to get back in that truck and drive away, or I am calling the police and reporting an attempted break-in and trespassing." 1. 2. My mother burst into tears. Not genuine tears of sorrow. They were angry, manipulative, weaponized tears. "After everything we've done for you. We raised you. We fed you. We put a roof over your head. That was your legal obligation as parents," I shouted back, taking a step forward. 7. 8. My dad pointed a trembling finger at my chest. "You will deeply regret this. You will end up alone in this big house, with no one to bury you. You are dead to us." 9. They backed off. The movers, looking incredibly awkward and realizing they were in the middle of a legal nightmare, muttered apologies and started loading the heavy dresser back into the truck. I stood on the porch, my arms crossed, watching them pull out of the driveway. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had won the battle, but the war had just been declared, and the lengths they were willing to go to would defy all human logic. If you ever want to see exactly how quickly a toxic family can spin a narrative, just watch them when they are denied what they believe they are entitled to. Having completely failed the physical invasion of my property, my family immediately pivoted to a psychological and social siege, and the primary battlefield was social media. Less than 24 hours after the humiliating moving truck incident, Chloe launched a brand new Instagram account. She called it Apartment Life with 3 Kids. Suddenly, my feed and the feeds of everyone we knew were flooded with highly curated, dramatically lit, black and white photos of my nephews looking miserably cramped in their shared bedroom. The captions were absolute masterclasses in emotional extortion and public manipulation. Teaching the kids that love is so much more important than square footage today. One caption read, accompanied by a picture of her oldest son looking sad on a tiny bed. It's so incredibly hard explaining to an innocent 8-year-old why his wealthy uncle has 3 empty bedrooms he uses for hobbies, while he has to share a twin bed with his little brother. But God gives his toughest battles to his strongest soldiers. Hashtag family first, hashtag praying for a home, hashtag selfish world, hashtag minimalist living. It was a highly targeted, precision assassination of my character. And the extended family, hungry for drama, ate it up like candy. My cousin Kevin, a guy I hadn't spoken to in 5 years because he borrowed money and never paid it back, commented, absolutely disgusting, Chloe. I am so sorry. Some people get a little tech salary, sit in front of a screen, and completely forget where they came from. Real men provide for their families. Liam is a disgrace. My mother was sharing Chloe's posts directly to her Facebook wall, tagging everyone in our hometown, church members, old high school teachers, local business owners. She added passive-aggressive little prayers about hoping my hardened heart would soften before the holidays. They were meticulously painting me as a greedy, corporate monster hoarding immense wealth while my innocent, angelic relatives suffered in absolute squalor. I started getting texts from people I barely knew, high school acquaintances I hadn't seen in a decade, distant relatives from out of state, all offering unsolicited, highly offensive advice about how family legacy is more important than property rights. But the betrayal didn't stay confined to the glowing screens of the internet. It bled out into my physical reality, poisoning my actual life. A few days later, on a Saturday morning, I was walking out to my mailbox. My neighbor, Dave, a guy I normally drank beers with on the weekends and watched football games with, was mowing his lawn. Usually, he'd shut the mower off and come over for a chat. Today, he gave me an incredibly cold, hard stare. "Hey, Dave," I said, offering a friendly wave, trying to maintain some normalcy. He didn't wave back. He left the mower idling, walked over to the white picket fence dividing our properties, and crossed his arms over his chest. "Liam, man, I saw Chloe's posts on Facebook. My wife showed me. I felt my stomach drop. Dave, you have to understand, that's not the whole story. I didn't realize you were kicking your own brother and his little kids out on the street." Dave interrupted, his tone laced with disgust. "That's pretty low, dude. I mean, I see you inside. You work in your sweatpants all day. You don't even use the whole house. Would it really kill you to help your own flesh and blood out? My brother lived with me for a year when he lost his job." I felt a cold rush of adrenaline. They were turning my own neighborhood against me. They were weaponizing the people I lived next to. "Dave, listen to me. They aren't on the street. They live in a leased apartment. And they are demanding, not asking, demanding, that I give them my house, sign over the deed, and move into my parents' unfinished basement. I bought this house." Dave looked highly skeptical, shaking his head. "That's not what your mom told my wife at the grocery store. She said you explicitly promised Ethan the house when you got your big promotion last year, and now you're backing out because you want to build a private gym in the spare room." The lies were so thick, so maliciously fabricated. I could barely breathe. I realized there was no point arguing. I turned around, walked back inside, locked the heavy deadbolt, and just stood in the dark hallway. I felt entirely isolated. It is a terrifying, suffocating feeling to realize that the people who share your DNA are actively, strategically trying to destroy your reputation just to steal your real estate. But the absolute peak of their insanity, the moment that proved they had completely lost touch with reality, happened the following Tuesday. I had a rare afternoon where I didn't have any video calls scheduled, so I was deep into a complex coding sequence, wearing noise-canceling headphones. Suddenly, my motion alerts went off. I pulled up the high-definition camera feed on my second monitor and saw my mother and father standing right in the middle of my front lawn. My father was holding a clipboard and a long measuring tape, aggressively measuring the distance from my front porch to the sidewalk. My mother was holding a large wooden stake and a heavy mallet. She was hammering something directly into my perfectly manicured grass. I threw my headphones on the desk, ripped open the front door, and marched outside. Stuck right in the middle of my lawn, facing the street for the whole neighborhood to see, was a massive, professionally printed real estate sign. It was glossy and bright. It had a huge picture of Ethan, Chloe, and their 3 kids smiling. The bold, massive letters read, "Future home of the Baker family. Renovations starting soon. God is good." "What the hell is this?" I demanded, marching over, yanking the heavy wooden sign out of the dirt, and throwing it aggressively onto the concrete pavement. My father didn't even flinch. He just kept making detailed notes on his clipboard, completely ignoring my outrage. "Don't break the sign, Liam. It cost $80 at the print shop. We're just taking measurements for the patio expansion Ethan wants. He wants to put a fire pit right where your rose bushes are. Get off my property," I yelled, my voice cracking, no longer caring if Dave or any of the other neighbors heard me. "I am not giving you the house. Are you people completely delusional? You are trespassing again." My mother walked up to me, holding the mallet. Her face was pulled into a mask of pure, terrifying condescension. She looked at me not like a son, but like a psychiatric patient. "Liam, sweetheart, we are doing this for your own good. You are isolating yourself in this house. You're becoming a hermit. You stare at screens all day. We have consulted with the extended family, and we are stepping in to manage your affairs because clearly, living alone is severely affecting your mental state. You're hoarding." That was the exact moment the ground shifted permanently beneath my feet. She didn't just sound entitled anymore. She sounded clinical. She sounded like she was building a legal case. "Manage my affairs?" I repeated, my voice dropping from a yell to a dangerous, quiet whisper. "I am 30 years old. I make 3 times what Ethan makes. I pay my own bills. My credit score is over 800. You are not managing anything." "We'll see about that," my father said, snapping his clipboard shut with a sharp crack. "You bought this house with fake computer money. It's not real labor. You haven't earned the right to be this incredibly selfish. We'll be back on Friday with the general contractor to look at the load-bearing walls. Be ready." I watched them get into their SUV and drive away. A deep, sickening dread pooled in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't just a squabble over a house anymore. They were actively strategizing to strip me of my autonomy. They were setting the stage to claim I was mentally unfit to own property. The psychological warfare reached an absolute fever pitch over the next 48 hours. I was operating on purely adrenaline and caffeine. I woke up the morning after the sign incident, went to leave through my front door for an early morning run to clear my head, and found something heavy and metallic dangling from my front doorknob. It was a heavy-duty steel lockbox, the exact kind real estate agents used to store keys for property showings. They had actually come back in the middle of the night, sneaked onto my porch, and attached a lockbox to the handle of my own home. I was furious. I marched to the garage, grabbed a massive pair of bolt cutters, snapped the thick steel shackle in half with a loud crack, and threw the entire contraption into the trash bin. But the physical harassment was nothing compared to the legal fiction they were trying to weave. The real gut punch came with the afternoon mail delivery. Amidst the junk flyers and bills was a thick, heavy manila envelope with no return address. I opened it at my kitchen island. Inside was a multi-page document that looked like a formal legal contract, but upon closer inspection, it was printed on standard cheap printer paper. The header, typed in bold Times New Roman, Read. Residential Lease Agreement and Family Asset Redistribution Protocol. I read through the clauses, my vision literally blurring with sheer disbelief. It was a fake lease agreement drafted entirely by my parents, outlining the strict terms of my tenancy in their basement. The audacity was staggering. It demanded I pay them $600 a month in rent for the privilege of living underground. It required me to officially surrender the deed of my house to Ethan within 30 days. It included an aggressively strict curfew of 10 p.m., after which the basement door would be locked from the outside. Clause 4 was the most insulting. Tenant Liam is only allowed upstairs main floor access for meals and approved family gatherings. Kitchen privileges are restricted to non-peak hours to avoid disturbing the homeowners. It was a manifesto of pure, unfiltered, draconian control. The stress began to crush me physically. I wasn't sleeping. I was eating terribly. I was jumping at every shadow on my security monitors. The next day, during a critical one-on-one virtual meeting with my department manager, Sarah, I finally cracked under the pressure. I had missed a major coding deadline for the first time in my entire professional career. When she gently asked me what was going on, the dam just broke. I told her everything. I told her about the moving truck, the broken lockbox, the insane fake lease agreement, the coordinated social media smear campaign, and the neighborhood isolation. Sarah is a sharp, fiercely intelligent, no-nonsense executive based out of our Chicago office. She has zero tolerance for drama. She sat in her ergonomic chair, listened quietly, and took meticulous notes. When I finished my frantic explanation, she leaned into the camera, looking straight into my eyes. "Liam, I need you to listen to me very carefully right now," Sarah said, her voice dead serious. "What you are describing isn't just a quirky family drama or a boundary issue. It is severe psychological abuse, and it is highly organized, targeted harassment. You need to stop treating them like your parents, and start treating them like hostile actors trying to ruin your life." Her words were the bucket of ice water I desperately needed. She named it exactly what it was. I was still reacting like a wounded son, trying to reason with people who actively wanted to destroy me for their own gain. "Take the rest of the week off. Fully paid," Sarah commanded, typing something into her system. "Gather your evidence. Call a lawyer right now. And Liam?" The principal engineer position in the Denver, Colorado office just opened up. "I was going to wait until the quarter ended to talk to you about it, but I'm putting your name in for the promotion today. It comes with a massive salary bump. Get out of Ohio. Let's get you a comprehensive relocation package." A lifeline. A massive, beautiful geographical lifeline. Denver. Mountains. Distance. But before I could even fully process the relief of an escape route, the final, most terrifying piece of my parents' sinister puzzle fell into place. I received a certified letter in the mail later that afternoon. I had to sign for it at the door. This one wasn't printed on cheap home paper. It was printed on the official embossed letterhead of Dr. Evans, a local general practitioner my family had used since I was 5 years old. The letter stated that based on deeply concerning, repeated reports from immediate family members regarding sudden behavioral changes, severe social isolation, paranoia regarding property, and an unhealthy detachment from reality, Dr. Evans was formally recommending a full psychiatric evaluation to determine if I possessed the mental capacity to make sound financial and residential decisions. My heart hammered against my ribs like a jackhammer. The lockbox, the lawn measurements, the social media posts framing me as unstable and hoarding. The fake lease. It wasn't just bullying. It was a highly coordinated effort to build a documented paper trail. They weren't just trying to bully me out of the house. They were trying to establish legal, medical guardianship over me to forcefully seize my real estate. If they could prove I was mentally unfit, they could take power of attorney. I didn't panic this time. The panic was gone, replaced by absolute, freezing clarity. I walked into my office, sat at my desk, and started a fresh, highly encrypted folder on my hard drive. I downloaded every single text message. I saved every voicemail. I screenshotted every Instagram and Facebook post. I exported every second of security footage in high definition. I called my real estate attorney, a bulldog of a lawyer named Mr. Henderson, who had helped me close on the house. I forwarded him the fake lease, the threatening voicemails, and the doctor's letter. "They are digging their own graves, Liam," Mr. Henderson told me over the phone, his voice dripping with dark, professional satisfaction. "This borders on extortion, fraud, and medical malpractice on the doctor's part for issuing a letter based on hearsay. Let them push. Do not engage. When they cross the final line, we will drop the hammer so hard they won't know what century they're in." I spent the next 3 days in complete, utter silence. I didn't respond to texts. I didn't look at social media. I packed my most valuable items, my servers, my documents, my family heirlooms, into a secure, climate-controlled storage unit across town. I was a ghost in my own home, waiting in the absolute eye of the storm. I knew they wouldn't take the silence as a victory. They would take it as weakness. They would escalate. And I was exactly right. It was a Tuesday night. I was lying in bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The house was dead quiet. The wind howled slightly outside. And then, at exactly 3:14 a.m., my phone vibrated violently on the nightstand. It wasn't a text message. It was a critical, high-priority alert from my backyard security camera. Motion detected at the back patio door. I rolled over, snatched the phone, opened the live feed, and felt the breath completely leave my lungs. Standing in the pitch dark, illuminated only by the glowing infrared night vision of the camera, was my brother Ethan, and he was holding a heavy steel crowbar. I was lying fully clothed on top of my bed cover, staring at the ceiling fan, when the notification vibrated against the wood of my nightstand. It was 3:14 a.m. The house was completely silent, the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that presses against your eardrums. I reached out, my hands steady despite the ice water running through my veins, and picked up my phone. The high-definition infrared camera feed from my backyard patio illuminated the screen. There, standing in the pitch black, was my brother, Ethan. He was wearing a dark hoodie, the hood pulled up, but the camera's night vision caught the unmistakable profile of his face. And gripped tightly in his right hand was a heavy, solid steel crowbar. Crouched in the bushes just a few feet behind him, looking nervously over her shoulder, was his wife, Chloe. For about 10 seconds I didn't move. I just watched the screen, completely paralyzed not by fear, but by the sheer, unadulterated reality of the betrayal. This was my flesh and blood. This was the boy I had shared a bedroom with growing up, the boy who had broken my toys and never apologized, the man who had drained our shared college fund. And now he was standing at my back door, actively trying to pry the frame away from the glass. They weren't just entitled anymore. They had crossed the threshold into violent criminality. I didn't yell. I didn't turn on a single light. I didn't go downstairs to confront them with a baseball bat. I was a systems architect. I dealt with hostile breaches by isolating the threat and calling in the authorities. I minimized the camera app, opened my phone dialer, and pressed 911. 911, what is your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional, and anchoring. My name is Liam, I whispered, keeping my voice barely above a breath. There is a man actively trying to break into my house through the back patio door with a crowbar. He is accompanied by a woman. I am upstairs, locked in my bedroom. I have them on live security cameras. Okay, Liam. I am dispatching units to your location right now. Are you armed? No, I replied. But the intruder has a heavy steel crowbar. And I know who he is. It's my older brother. There was a half-second pause on the line. Even the dispatcher, who likely heard horrors every single night, was momentarily thrown by the absolute tragedy of that statement. Stay on the line with me, Liam. Units are 3 minutes out. Do not engage them. I put the phone on speaker, muted my microphone, and switched back to the camera feed. Ethan was struggling. The heavy-duty security doors I had installed earlier that week were holding firm. He wedged the crowbar between the door and the frame, leaning his entire body weight into it. I could see the muscles in his neck straining. Chloe was frantically whispering something to him, pointing toward the street. Then it happened. The sound echoed through the silent house like a gunshot. Crash. Ethan, frustrated by the deadbolt, had swung the heavy end of the crowbar directly into the double-paned reinforced glass. It didn't shatter into a million pieces like normal glass. It spider-webbed, holding together but giving way just enough for him to kick the center out. The crunch of his heavy boots stepping through the broken glass onto my custom hardwood floors made my stomach violently churn. He was inside my sanctuary. "They breached the door," I whispered to the dispatcher. "He's inside the kitchen. Units are pulling onto your street right now, Liam. Stay exactly where you are." Through my bedroom door, I could hear the heavy, clumsy footsteps downstairs. Ethan was moving toward the living room. I heard the distinct sound of a cabinet opening. He wasn't just here to secure the property. He was snooping. Suddenly, the pitch-black darkness of my bedroom was illuminated by the rapid, strobing flashes of red and blue lights bouncing off the trees outside my window. They had arrived silently, without sirens. A booming, authoritative voice erupted from my backyard, amplified by a megaphone. "Police department, drop the weapon and get on the ground. Show me your hands now." A high-pitched, terrifying scream ripped through the night air. It was Chloe, still hiding in the bushes outside. Downstairs, I heard a loud thud, a scramble of boots on hardwood, and then the unmistakable sound of a heavy body being tackled to the floor. "Do not move. Stop resisting. Put your hands behind your back." "It's my brother's house," Ethan's voice shrieked, echoing up the stairwell. His voice was completely stripped of its usual arrogant bravado. It was high, thin, and absolutely terrified. "I have permission. He's my brother. We're family. I am securing the residence," a second officer's voice called out. Heavy footsteps began ascending the stairs. "Homeowner, if you are up here, make yourself known. I'm in the master bedroom, coming out," I called out loudly, keeping my hands empty and raised as I slowly opened my door. The hallway was swept by the blinding beam of a tactical flashlight. The officer lowered the light when he saw me. "Are you Liam?" he asked, his hand hovering near his duty belt. "Yes, officer. I'm the homeowner. We have 2 suspects in custody downstairs. We need you to identify them." I walked down my own staircase. The living room lights had been flicked on. The scene in my kitchen was something straight out of a surreal nightmare. There was shattered glass glittering all over the floor. The cold night air was blowing in through the ruined patio door. And there, pinned face down on my expensive hardwood, hands securely cuffed behind his back, was Ethan. Standing by the broken door, sobbing hysterically in handcuffs, her makeup running down her face in dark black streaks, was Chloe. Officer Davis, the veteran cop who patrolled our neighborhood, looked at me. "Do you know these individuals, sir?" I looked at Ethan. He turned his head sideways on the floor, looking up at me with wide, desperate eyes. "Liam, tell them it's a misunderstanding. Mom and Dad said it was okay to start moving stuff in tonight to surprise you. Tell them to take these cuffs off." I stared down at him. All the years of him being the golden child, all the years of my achievements being diminished, all the stress, the fake lease, the lockbox, the absolute disrespect for my career and my life. It all coalesced into a single block of ice in my chest. "I know them," I said, my voice completely devoid of any emotion. It was dead flat. "That is Ethan Baker and his wife Chloe Baker. I do not want them here. They broke into my property. I want to press full charges for breaking and entering, property damage, and trespassing." Chloe let out a wail that sounded like a dying animal. "You can't do this to us. We have 3 children. You're ruining our lives." "You ruined your own lives," I replied coldly, turning to Officer Davis. "I have the entire incident recorded on multiple high-definition cameras. I will provide the footage for the lawsuit." They hauled Ethan up by his arms. He was crying now, real tears of panic. As they marched them out my front door and loaded them into the back of the cruiser, my phone started vibrating again. It was my mother. I ignored it, I spent the next 2 hours giving my official statement and providing the digital files to the police. By 6 a.m., the sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, casting a pale, cold light over my broken door. My phone rang again. This time it was Mr. Henderson, my lawyer. Liam. His gravelly voice came through the speaker. I just got a call from the precinct. Your parents are down there right now trying to bail Ethan and Chloe out. And Liam, I did some digging into your parents' financial records like we discussed yesterday. I found the motive. I sat down heavily on a stool at my kitchen island, staring at the broken glass. What motive? I thought they just wanted the house for Ethan's kids. No, Mr. Henderson said, his voice dropping an octave. It's much worse than that. You remember Ethan's custom car shop that failed years ago? Yeah, he bankrupted it. He didn't just bankrupt it, Liam. Right before it went under, Ethan completely destroyed a client's vehicle. It was a vintage, fully restored Porsche 911. The engine block cracked due to his gross negligence. The client sued Ethan personally for hundreds of thousands of dollars. To keep their golden boy out of a devastating civil lawsuit and potential criminal fraud charges, your parents took out a massive second mortgage on their own home to pay off the settlement. The room started to spin slightly. They took out a second mortgage? Yes, and they are currently 60 days past due. They are drowning, Liam. They are on the absolute brink of foreclosure. They don't just want Ethan to live in your house. They wanted you out, and they wanted that psychiatric evaluation to go through so they could declare you mentally unfit. If they had power of attorney over you, they wouldn't just move Ethan in. They were planning to liquidate your entire real estate portfolio, your house, and drain your corporate salary accounts to pay off the debt Ethan caused. I gripped the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. It wasn't about family. It wasn't about bedrooms for the kids. It was a calculated, desperate, predatory financial heist. They were going to sacrifice my sanity, my career, and my home to cover up Ethan's catastrophic failure. I'm coming to the precinct, I told Mr. Henderson. Meet me there. I arrived at the local police precinct just before 8 a.m. The lobby was a sterile, depressing room bathed in buzzing fluorescent light, smelling strongly of floor wax and stale, burnt coffee. The moment I pushed through the heavy glass double doors, the shouting stopped. Sitting on a hard plastic bench against the far wall were my mother and father. Ethan and Chloe were still in holding cells, waiting for the bail bondsman to process the paperwork. When Eleanor saw me, she didn't look remorseful. She looked like a cornered animal. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, and marched toward me, her eyes blazing with a toxic mix of fury and sheer panic. You monster, she hissed, pointing a trembling finger right at my face. You actually had your own brother arrested. You put the mother of your nephews in a cage. Have you lost your mind? Tell the desk sergeant right now that you are dropping the charges. We are a family, Liam. We handle things internally. I didn't back away. I stood my ground, towering over her. We don't handle felonies internally, Mom. He broke my glass door with a crowbar. My father stepped up, puffing his chest out, trying to use physical intimidation. It was a misunderstanding. We told him to go over there to secure the property. We thought you were having a mental episode, and now you've ruined everything. How is Ethan going to explain an arrest record to his boss? I don't care, I said flatly. Just then, Mr. Henderson walked through the doors. He was wearing a sharp, expensive navy suit and carrying a thick leather briefcase. He looked like a shark entering a goldfish pond. He stood next to me, opening his briefcase and pulling out a thick stack of documents. Mr. and Mrs. Baker, Mr. Henderson said smoothly. I am Liam's legal counsel. I strongly advise you to stop harassing my client in a police station, as it can and will be added to the harassment and extortion charges we are currently drafting. Eleanor scoffed, though her hands were visibly shaking. Extortion? You're a ridiculous ambulance chaser. We are his parents. We are simply trying to manage a family asset. Ah yes, the family asset, Mr. Henderson said, flipping through a file. You mean this house? The one Liam owns free and clear? Because from the financial records I subpoenaed yesterday afternoon, it seems your own house is practically owned by the bank. 60 days past due on a massive second mortgage. Robert? A mortgage you took out to pay off the owner of the vintage Porsche that Ethan destroyed. The color instantly, completely drained from both of my parents' faces. They looked as if they had just been physically struck by lightning. Robert's mouth opened and closed like a fish suffocating on a dock. Eleanor stumbled back a half step, bumping into the plastic bench. You hacked our private records, my father sputtered, his voice breaking. Publicly filed liens and bank notices are public record, Robert, Mr. Henderson replied coldly. We know exactly what you were trying to do. The fake lease agreement, the lockbox, the social media campaign painting Liam as mentally unstable. And the final piece of the puzzle, the letter from Dr. Evans demanding a psychiatric hold. You weren't trying to find Ethan a place to live. You were trying to get conservatorship over Liam so you could legally steal his real estate and his high-tech salary to save yourselves from bankruptcy. The silence in that precinct lobby was deafening. The sheer, ugly truth hung in the air, stripping away all their moral high ground, all their fake religious posturing about family values. They were thieves, cowardly, desperate thieves. It's not fair, Eleanor suddenly sobbed, her voice cracking, abandoning the anger for pure victimhood. You have so much, Liam. You have that massive salary. You have that beautiful house. You don't even have a wife or kids to spend it on. We were going to lose our home. Ethan made a mistake, and he's your brother. It's your duty to share your inheritance, your wealth, to protect the family name. I don't have an inheritance, I said, my voice echoing off the tile walls. Because you gave it all to Ethan for a car shop that he burned to the ground. I built my life with my own 2 hands, and you tried to steal it. You are dead to me. Do not contact me again, or Mr. Henderson will file for a permanent restraining order. I turned on my heel and walked out of the police station, leaving them standing there in the ruins of their shattered conspiracy. When I got to my car, I sat in the driver's seat and just breathed. The cold morning air felt incredible in my lungs. For the first time in 30 years, the fog of guilt that had constantly hovered over my head was completely gone. Later that morning, I logged onto my laptop from my home office. The broken glass downstairs had been boarded up by an emergency repair crew. I opened an encrypted video link with Sarah, my manager. How are you holding up, Liam? She asked, her expression serious. I'm done here, Sarah. The ties are completely severed. I need out of Ohio. Sarah nodded, a small, proud smile touching her lips. Done. The promotion to principal engineer in the Denver office is officially approved by the board. Your new salary includes a 20% bump. The relocation package covers full moving expenses and temporary corporate housing while you find a new place in Colorado. You start in 3 weeks. I thanked her, closed the laptop, and immediately called Mr. Henderson. Sell the house. Off market. Fast. I don't care if we take a slight hit on the price. I want it gone before they even realize what's happening. Mr. Henderson works fast. Within 48 hours, he brought me a private cash buyer. A young couple moving in from out of state who loved the custom kitchen and didn't need to deal with bank appraisals. We signed the preliminary paperwork in his office. But my parents, out on bail along with Ethan and Chloe, made one final, incredibly desperate legal maneuver. They were facing criminal charges, their debt was suffocating them, and they realized they were losing control. A week before my closing date, Mr. Henderson called me, laughing darkly. Liam, you won't believe this. Your father just tried to file a fraudulent mechanics lien against your property at the county clerk's office. A what? For what work? He submitted a handwritten invoice claiming you owe him $85,000 for childhood expenses, room and board, and emotional support services provided before you turned 18. He tried to attach it to the deed to block any potential sale of the house. It was pathetic. It was the frantic flailing of a drowning man. Mr. Henderson obliterated the fake lien within hours with an emergency injunction, threatening to add felony fraud to my father's growing list of charges. The county clerk threw the paperwork in the trash. Meanwhile, my house became a fortress of quiet efficiency. I hired a specialized moving team. They came in unmarked trucks in the middle of the night. I packed my servers, my clothes, my life. I left no trace. I didn't tell a single soul in the neighborhood. Not even Dave. Let them believe the lies. The truth was about to hit them like a freight train. In the midst of this, a surprising ally emerged. I received a phone call from Grace, Chloe's mother. Grace was a tough, no-nonsense retired nurse who had always disapproved of Ethan. "Liam," Grace said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "I am so incredibly sorry for what my daughter and your brother did to you. It's unforgivable." "Thank you, Grace. But you don't have to apologize for them." "I'm not just apologizing," she said fiercely. "I'm taking action. I just filed for emergency custody of the 3 kids. With Ethan and Chloe facing felony charges, and their apartment lease getting terminated next week due to unpaid rent, Child Protective Services was getting involved. I won't let my grandkids go into the system because of their parents' greed. The kids are safe with me now." A massive weight lifted off my shoulders. The kids were the only innocent victims in this entire nightmare. Knowing they were safe with a sane adult was the final piece of closure I needed. I loaded the last box into my car. I stood in the empty living room of the house I had rebuilt. I didn't feel sad. I felt victorious. I locked the front door, leaving the keys inside a secure lockbox for the new owners, and started the long drive toward the Rocky Mountains. Closing day. I was sitting on the balcony of a beautiful, high-rise corporate apartment in downtown Denver. The air was thin, crisp, and completely devoid of the suffocating humidity of Ohio. The snow-capped peaks of the Rockies framed the horizon. I had my laptop open on the patio table, a hot cup of black coffee in my hand. My phone buzzed. It was an alert from the security cameras I had officially transferred over to the new owners, the Millers. We had an agreement. I would keep access to the exterior feeds for 1 extra week, just in case my family tried anything insane. They did not disappoint. At exactly 10 a.m., my parents' SUV pulled up to the curb in front of my old house, and trailing right behind them was a massive, rented 20-foot U-Haul truck. I watched the live feed in high definition. Eleanor and Robert hopped out of the SUV. They looked haggard, stressed, but weirdly triumphant. They had absolutely no idea the house had been sold. They thought I was still cowering inside, ignoring their calls. Robert marched up to the front door, holding a pair of heavy bolt cutters, while a confused-looking local locksmith stood nervously on the porch. Eleanor was holding a stack of envelopes. She was waving them at the locksmith, pointing at the door. I turned the audio feed on. "We have tenant rights," Eleanor was loudly explaining to the uncomfortable locksmith. "We have established legal residency. Look, we have mail addressed to us at this property. Our son is having a mental breakdown inside and locked us out. Cut the lock." They had literally mailed themselves junk catalogs to my address over the past 2 weeks to try and claim squatters' rights. It was a strategy born of pure desperation and internet legal advice. Before the locksmith could even touch the door, a sleek black sedan pulled into the driveway, blocking the U-Haul. It was Mr. Miller, the new owner. He stepped out of the car, looking incredibly confused and irritated. "Excuse me," Mr. Miller said, raising his voice. "Who are you people and what are you doing on my property?" Robert turned around, puffing his chest out. "Your property? Listen here, buddy, this is my son's house. We are moving in today. Move your car before I have it towed." Mr. Miller, who happened to be a corporate litigator, didn't flinch. "I closed on this house 3 hours ago. The deed is in my name. You have exactly 30 seconds to get off my driveway before I call the police for trespassing and attempted burglary." The absolute, paralyzing shock that washed over my parents' faces was a masterpiece. It was a cinematic moment of pure devastation. Eleanor dropped the fake mail onto the porch. Robert lowered the bolt cutters, his mouth hanging open. "Sold," Eleanor shrieked, her voice echoing down the street, loud enough that I saw Dave step out onto his porch next door to watch. He couldn't have sold it. It's our family home. He owes us. We have a lien. Mr. Miller ignored her. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. The locksmith, realizing he was caught in the middle of a major crime, quickly packed his tools and sprinted to his van, speeding away. 10 minutes later, 2 police cruisers arrived with their sirens blaring. And because the universe has a wonderful sense of irony, one of the responding officers was Officer Davis, the exact same cop who had arrested Ethan a few weeks prior. I watched, sipping my coffee from 1,000 miles away, as Officer Davis approached my parents. Robert tried to scream about inheritance, about fake leases, about family loyalty. Officer Davis wasn't having any of it. He asked Mr. Miller for his identification and his digital closing documents. Mr. Miller provided them instantly. "Sir, ma'am," Officer Davis said, his voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "You have no legal right to be here. Furthermore, you are currently out on bail for harassment and trespassing against the previous owner. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Eleanor completely melted down. She threw herself onto the perfectly manicured grass, screaming, crying, begging the neighbors for help. Dave, tell them Liam is stealing from us. Help us." Dave stood on his porch, his arms crossed, shaking his head in absolute disgust. He finally saw the truth. He saw the sheer madness of the people who had manipulated him. He went back inside and closed his door. I watched as my father, the man who had constantly belittled my career and my life, was shoved into the back of a police cruiser, his head pushed down by the officer's hand. I watched my mother, still sobbing uncontrollably, get placed into the second car. The U-Haul sat empty in the driveway, a monument to their spectacular, self-inflicted ruin. The domino effect was swift and merciless. With my parents in jail again facing violating bail conditions, their finances completely collapsed. The bank moved forward with the foreclosure on their home. Ethan's life disintegrated just as fast. When his retail management company caught wind of his felony arrest for breaking and entering, he was terminated immediately. He lost his salary, his benefits, and whatever tiny shred of pride he had left. Chloe, realizing the golden goose was dead and the family was bankrupt, filed for a brutal, highly contested divorce. She tried to claim she was manipulated into the break-in, throwing Ethan completely under the bus. But with Grace holding custody of the kids and refusing to let Chloe use them as pawns, Chloe was left with nothing but legal fees and a ruined reputation. Her Instagram account, Apartment Life with 3 Kids, was deleted after hundreds of people reported it for fraud and harassment. They had tried to destroy my sanctuary to save themselves. Instead, they burned their own kingdom to the ground. It has been 6 months since I watched that police cruiser drive away from my old house. I am sitting in my new home office right now. The window beside my desk doesn't look out at a suburban street filled with gossiping neighbors and toxic family dynamics. It looks out over a sprawling valley, framed by the jagged, snow-dusted peaks of the Colorado Rockies. The air here is different. It's lighter. It's easier to breathe. The promotion to principal engineer changed my life. The salary bump was substantial, but the real value was the validation. My company, my boss Sarah, they looked at my work, my brain, my dedication, my late nights, and they told me it was valuable. They didn't call it fake computer money. They respected it. I started intensive therapy shortly after moving to Denver. It wasn't easy. Unpacking 30 years of being the invisible foundation holding up a golden child takes a toll. My therapist helped me realize that my parents never truly saw me as a son. They saw me as a resource, an emergency fund, an insurance policy for Ethan's inevitable failures. They loved what I could provide for the family unit, but they deeply resented my independence because it meant they couldn't control me. Setting boundaries isn't just about changing locks or blocking phone numbers. It's an internal rewiring. It's the incredibly painful process of accepting that the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally are actually entirely incapable of doing so. Blood does not mandate loyalty. DNA does not excuse abuse. Yesterday, I was clearing out my spam folder when I saw an email slip through the filters. It was from a generic, newly created Gmail address, but the subject line was unmistakable. Liam, please. We need you. I clicked it open, purely out of clinical curiosity. It was a long, rambling message from my mother. It was completely devoid of the arrogant, commanding tone she used to have. It was the desperate pleading of someone who had hit rock bottom. She detailed the horror of their current lives. The house had been foreclosed on. She and my father were living in a cheap residential motel on the outskirts of town. A massive chunk of Robert's pension was being garnished to pay for their mounting legal defense fees. Ethan was living on a friend's couch, going through a vicious divorce with Chloe, and only allowed supervised visitation with his kids because of the felony charges pending against him. The email ended with a plea. We know we made mistakes, Liam. We were just so scared of losing everything. Please, you have so much. Your salary is so high. If you could just wire us enough for a retainer for a better lawyer, or help Ethan get an apartment. We are your family. We are begging you. I read the email twice. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel a sudden rush of vindictive joy. I just felt a profound, heavy sadness for them. They had gambled everything on destroying me, and they had lost everything. I moved my mouse over the screen. I didn't type a reply. I didn't offer an explanation. I didn't tell them I forgave them, and I didn't tell them I hated them. I simply clicked delete. Then I permanently blocked the address. I don't regret a single thing I did. I don't regret calling the police on my own brother. I don't regret selling the house out from under them. I don't regret moving 1,000 miles away. I chose my peace over their chaos. I chose my sanity over their toxic loyalty. I built this life. Every line of code, every late night studying, every dollar saved, it was mine. And no one, absolutely no one, has the right to demand the fruits of your labor simply because they share your last name. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far. You're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. For anyone out there listening to this, especially those of you who have worked tirelessly to build your own sanctuary, hear me now. Your boundaries are valid. Your home is your castle. If you are dealing with relatives who belittle your career, who demand your resources, or who use guilt as a weapon to force you into submission, you are not crazy. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to draw a hard line in the sand against the people who raised you to protect your own peace? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. Remember, sometimes the most profound act of self-love is walking away. Stay strong.